Is it worth spending $100,000 or more to become a physical therapist? I'm going to share my thoughts as someone who's paid well over $100,000 to become a PT. Hey, if you're new to the channel, I'm Tim Fraticelli. I'm a physical therapist, and on this channel we talk about all things physical therapy, and today we're going to talk about the 3 things I wish I knew before spending over $100,000 to become a physical therapist. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because I wish I had seen a video like this when I was trying to decide whether or not to go back to grad school to become a PT, and you might be trying to figure this out for yourself right now, so I promise it's worth watching this video before you invest the next 3 years of your life in becoming a physical therapist. Okay, so let's take a look at some facts. According to the Commission on Accreditation in Physical Therapy Education, or CAPTE, the average cost to attend a 3-year private physical therapy program in the United States is $112,714. Now, going to a public university is about half the cost, but it'll set you back about $65,170 to become a physical therapist. Now, don't let those numbers fool you. Those are the averages. Some are lower and some are significantly higher. And there are still state PT programs with annual tuition less than $10,000 a year. Take the University of Texas in El Paso, for example, where the annual tuition for their DPT program is just over $9,000 a year for residents. Is a career as a physical therapist who earns $60,000 to $70,000 out of school worth it if you can attend a state program graduating with student loans well under $50,000? Yeah, that's actually not a bad deal at all. That places your debt to income ratio at about 0.70, which is very good for physical therapists. The first thing I wish I could tell myself back in the day is that you want to keep your debt to income ratio under 1, meaning you don't have more student loan debt than your average salary. Here's an example. Let's look at a school on the opposite end of the spectrum. And I'm not going to call them out by name, but all you have to do is search for top physical therapy program and you're going to find them on the list. One of those East Coast schools that gives you an opportunity to earn your Doctor of Physical Therapy degree and pay the tuition of $137,000. You heard that right, and for a new grad with a generous salary of $70,000, that puts your debt to income ratio at a whopping 1.95. That's almost double your salary. I mean, having 2 times your salary in student loan debt is absolutely ridiculous, regardless of the field. Unfortunately, it just so happens that PT, OT, speech therapy graduates, they've been on this dangerous path of debt, graduating with outrageous amounts of debt for the past decade or more. And this doesn't even include the estimated $22,000 a year you can expect to pay for living expenses. In over 3 years of grad school, this can easily add up to another $60,000 to your student loan debt. Listen, these numbers are absolutely crazy, and I'm not trying to badmouth these schools. And if you want to drop that much money on a program, or if you have a family member who wants to pay for you to attend a high-cost program, that's up to you. But on an average physical therapist starting salary of $60,000 to $70,000, you really can't afford $100,000 or more in debt. There has to be a point where you say, it's just not worth it financially to go to this program. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't become a physical therapist at all. There are still programs out there that you can attend and become a physical therapist, graduating with less than $100,000 in total student loans. But before you commit to a PT program, you need to set boundaries in terms of the money that you're willing to pay for the program compared to the expected salary that you may earn after graduating. So this is the first piece of advice that I wish I could go back in time and tell myself before I applied to all the physical therapy programs out there and got accepted to a program that added $120,000 or more of student loan to my plate. It's just not a good idea. So let's quickly summarize the first point. If the total cost of the program is more than the average starting salary of a PT, cross it off your list. I mean, unless you have the cash to pay the difference, or a family member who's helping to pay the bill, you really shouldn't take out student loans totaling more than what you'll earn annually as a physical therapist. Now, obviously, this is going to cut down on the number of schools that you apply to, and it may narrow it down just to state schools only, which actually I highly recommend. So the second piece of advice that I wish I knew before going to PT school is this. If you don't get into an affordable state PT school the first year, you need to find a job, save some money, and apply again to an affordable state school.
But Tim, I might get into a private school this year and start practicing PT 1 year earlier. I know it might cost me an additional $70,000 in student loans to attend this private school, but I don't think that I'll get into a state school this year.
Okay, well, here's another way to look at it. By not going to the private school and then taking a year off to work as a physical therapy aide, you gain more experience so you can get into a state school, and then you save $70,000 of extra debt by taking a year off to reapply to a state school, so that you didn't have to add that $70,000 of extra debt from the private physical therapy school. Heck, if you just made $30,000 a year during your off year, the amount of money that you save in student loans, $70,000 or more, is going to be way more than the difference in pay than you would have had if you graduated a year earlier as a physical therapist and started in the career. Even if you are rejected every year for 3 years, the math actually works in your favor to work a $30,000 a year job and to build your savings and your resume and to get accepted into an affordable state school, as compared to spending an additional $70,000 to $80,000 a year on a private PT school so you can get in the first time around. It's just not worth it. You're going to come out way ahead financially compared to someone who jumped on the opportunity to attend a private PT school paying $150,000 to $200,000 in student loans. Remember, you have to draw the line somewhere for a reasonable tuition, and that line needs to be at about a 1-to-1 ratio of debt to income. Number 3 is this: if you don't get into an affordable state school and you decide to go to a private PT program, do everything in your power to save money on living expenses for the next 3 years, because paying down these extra student loans on your physical therapy salary is going to be really, really challenging. Right now in the year 2020, the starting salary for a physical therapist is between $60,000 and $70,000 a year, depending on where you are in the country. But if you end up in an oversaturated market like St. Louis, Missouri, for example, you might only be able to make $55,000 to $60,000, maybe even $65,000 max right out of school if you're working in the outpatient setting. And here's the thing, I'm being pretty optimistic here by saying it's okay to borrow $60,000 to go to grad school so that you can earn $60,000 a year, because there are plenty of professions that you can enter that help people but allow you to earn $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year without adding a ton of grad school loans to the picture. And I get it, you might be tempted to skip this next part about finances and how much it costs to live as a PT student and a new graduate, but the next few minutes could actually save you thousands and thousands of dollars. So let's talk about living expenses for the next 3 years in PT school, because even if you're very conservative and you live off of $1,000 or $1,200 a month by having a roommate and driving an old car, you're still likely to spend over $40,000 just to live while you attend PT school for the next 3 years. Okay, and let's say you can work a part-time job and pay the $15,000 a year it may take for you to live in that area to go to school. That's fantastic. It's very unlikely. There's very few people that worked any part-time job in PT school, but if you can do something like that, then you would avoid adding $40,000 to your student loan balance for living expenses. But if you're adding $40,000 to your total student loan balance for living expenses, you just can't afford to attend a private university that adds another $100,000 to your bill and expect to be okay as a physical therapist earning $60,000 to $70,000 a year. I'm sorry, the numbers just don't add up, and you're going to spend the next 5 years pinching every single penny you make, paying $3,000 to $4,000 a month for the next 5 years toward your student loans. Really think about that for a minute.
But Tim, the school that I want to go to estimates the total cost of attendance to be $150,000. What should I do?
We should do some math together, okay? So $150,000 for tuition and living expenses is what you're considering spending, right? And you want to be done with your student loans in 4 to 5 years, right? So you need to make about $3,000 a month payment towards your student loans for the next 4 to 5 years, or about $36,000 a year, let's say. The point is this: if you want to become a physical therapist, you need to plan ahead to attend an affordable program and to consider the amount of effort it's going to require to pay off those loans after you're done. You gotta make the decision now on how much you want to spend before you even apply to a program. Scratch those programs off the list if they're over $100,000. It's just too expensive. Please hear me. I'm not saying becoming a physical therapist isn't worth it, but when you're faced with total student loans that are 1 or 2, or God forbid 3 times your expected income, you're setting yourself up for many years of living paycheck to paycheck under significant student loan burden that could have been avoided with some planning. And regardless of the profession, whether that's physical therapy, occupational therapy, physician assistant, nursing, going to med school, you need to consider the debt to income ratio very carefully and to do your best to keep it below a 1-to-1 ratio. It's not worth going into that much debt when there are plenty of options to work in healthcare without becoming a slave to student loans. Remember the rules to picking your PT school, or any school for that matter, and check out the rest of the career playlist to get an idea of the career and if it's something that you should pursue. I'll see you in one of those videos.